conservative commentator Charlie Kirk is murdered in an act of pro-trans terrorism. On the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th massacre, Hamas rejects yet another ceasefire. And how to defend Israel in your circle of friends. President Trump has finally taken the right course on the Russia-Ukraine war. What are the implications for the Axis powers? You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Mensch-Kight Geopolitics is your home for conservative commentary on international affairs with an eye toward Israel and the Middle East. I'm your host, Isaac Kite, your lovable lawnsman, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your shadow president, and your prophet of things to come. Well, my friends, it has been over a month, and I'm terribly, terribly sorry. Not long after I recorded the last episode, maybe about a week as I was getting ready to record the next one, I fell ill with the flu. And this was a bad one. And of course, when you have responsibilities at work, I have to get my work done. So, I go, work 10 hours and sleep 12 hours. So it took a few days to get over that and recover. And when I did finally recover, I had a lingering bronchitis. So I don't know if you can hear it, but I just recovered my voice just a few days ago, and it's been raspy, and I've been clearing my throat a lot. So we'll see if I can get through this. But this is the earliest I could possibly. I really want to get this episode out to you guys. For those who just completed their observance of Yom Kippur, I hope you had a good fast. There was a lot to think about this year, and talk about that a little bit. I mean, in addition to the usual, how can I be a better person? What harm may I have done? And all of that we fast and we think about how we can be better people, and that makes us a better nation and better servants of Hashem, of God. But this year, this extra layer because of the awful events in recent memory, how we handle things. So I'm going to dive right into my first topic, which is just it's painful to talk about. We've heard a lot about Charlie Kirk, so I don't want to belabor it too much, but I do want to say my part and express my frustrations at it. Charlie was a guy who would go to college campuses and he would sit down and he would argue. He'd argue with these college students, right? Not rudely or anything. They'd come up to him and they'd make their case, and he'd tear it apart and promote his case. And he was very good at it, and presenting the traditional American view, and presenting the conservative view, and presenting the Christian view to the students who could understand then, religion and morality, and how it isn't flexible enough to include, silly nonsense like the trans agenda. Unfortunately, he was a little too good at it. He attracted the ire and anger of the left, and ultimately the hate. The left is just so deluded. It's a horrible thing that happened. I had my own personal involvement in the story. I had the misfortune that when it happened, I was seeing things on X, and so I started looking through videos and looking through content, trying to find out. I heard he'd been shot. I was thinking, well, did someone shoot him at close range? Maybe it was a small caliber pistol or something. Maybe he can recover. I mean, if you're shot in the heart or something, you're done. But maybe it's a glancing wound. So I had the misfortune of watching a close-up video that showed the actual bullet hit, and I've seen so many things, my friends, from the October 7th videos to, in my teenage years when I studied the Holocaust, and I went and looked up the pictures. We didn't have the stuff wasn't on the internet back then. You had to go find the right books to look at of, Dr. Mengele's experiments and all of the horrors that took place in the Holocaust and all that. So I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but to see that, he's at a college campus. There's a whole bunch of young people around. His daughter is nearby. She saw him fall and thought he was hurt and ran to see if he was okay. His wife and young son were there. It's, I have a family myself. I try to protect them from these things. I don't want them to see these videos. I don't want them to see this evil. It's awful. How anyone could do this, you know, take a life like that. And you know, I, I sit here and I think to you, my friends, in Judaism, life is sacred, and Christianity inherited that belief as well. Life is sacred. We can't take life. We don't have the authority, the power within ourselves just to take life. It says right there in the Ten Commandments, lo tirtzach, you will not kill and hate. You cannot just kill because you feel like it. Yossi insulted me. I don't like him. Bam, he's dead. That's not how it works. Okay. When a person commits murder, and we have two witnesses that saw them do it, and they are convicted in a court of law with proper judicial procedure and due process and all of that sort of thing, before properly appointed judges and what have you, appointed by the king or the parliament or whoever the legitimate government authority is under Torah. You have many different options. The point is, then we have to execute, because life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, foot for a foot, right? We cannot let those kinds of crimes fly. Can't let it pass. If we are too compassionate, we will invite crime and victimhood upon ourselves. You can't just kill people, right? There are lots of people I disagree with out there. Members of Congress I don't like. Professors I don't like. There's all kinds of anti-Semites out there. We'll maybe talk about it later. I just lost a friend. I can't have friends on the left anymore, because they were spreading anti-Semitic propaganda and basically advocating for the murder of Jews. Not intentionally, but that's what they were doing. I tried to explain it, and that's the end of that. Is people on the left are just so deluded. So what makes you think that your cause is so great, that you have such authority that you can decide to kill someone because they disagree with you? I don't want any of these people that I don't like killed. Right now, there's the Ayatollah of Iran and the Hamas terrorist, people who have already murdered people, the guys at Hezbollah. They are murdering people and contributing to the murder of people. And these are people who have, engaged in warfare against our people. Yeah, when they die, there's a certain justice to that. We'd rather they didn't have to, because we wish people could be civilized and decent, but they aren't. So this is just, my dear wife was pointing out, when we were in college back in the aughts, the early aughts, of course, we were in Santa Cruz County, which is, where people go when San Francisco is too conservative. If you've ever been to Santa Cruz, you know what I'm talking about. It used to be kind of an open-minded, hippie, kumbaya sort of community. When we were in college, that started to change. It started to be where you could only express certain opinions. You could only believe certain things. It was starting to get kind of controlled. And they had people out, at the college and the university. They were tabling for Hugo Chavez, and supporting these dictators and murderers and what have you. So we saw this coming. We saw wokeness in its infancy, when it was normal in our world, 25 years ago, in a way that it has now manifested itself and become a problem that the entire country recognizes. But at the time, it was nascent. It was just seeding. It was just beginning to push the first leaves, the first stem up out of the ground. And that is ultimately what drove me away from the left. What caused me to switch sides, get tired of this wokeness. I saw that nothing good was going to come from it. But one of the things that really frustrated us when we were in college there is you'd have people talk about how, words are violence. Words are words. And yes, insults hurt. It's an unfortunate reality. People are cruel. Okay? But my telling you that I can't play along with your trans ideology is not violence. That's an opinion. People are allowed to have their opinion. Going around beating people up for having a different opinion or for being trans or whatever, that would be violence. But there isn't any of that, Right. They want there to be. They keep talking. They keep saying that we're these violent people, and then the violence never manifests. So then, they go out and perpetrate the violence themselves, I guess. But we've had a trans person shoot up a church. We've had the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We've had more leftist violence in this country since then, and it's got to stop. We've got to get a control on this. But this ideology that I saw 25 years ago, developing this idea that words are violence, that the oppressed, whatever the left defines as an oppressed group, are allowed to strike out, to lash out and attack their oppressors, society and all at large, in any way they like. It's okay for them to do anything. The Palestinians can rape and murder and torture children to death, because their resistance to their oppressor. Anyway, we became very familiar with all of this, and it's hurtful to see it here, but um, it's an attack on all of us, isn't it? I mean, it's an attack on everyone who believes in traditional values, especially people like myself, people like Ben Shapiro, others who speak out and put ourselves out there. Charlie Kirk would put himself in front of people to talk with them. He was always polite. He never insulted people. He didn't attack people. He would attack their ideas and their statements. And maybe the nutters themselves wouldn't get it, but then other people would hear it, and you could make up your mind, and you could see the insanity of it. And that was very effective. And it was so effective they decided to kill him. And it's heartrending. And as a father, I think of those two kids, without their father. It's one thing, my my childhood was traumatic, and my family was a mess, but I won't get into. But you know, it wasn't malicious. Let's just say. I mean, it's not hateful, but in this case, these children are going to grow up knowing that someone deliberately murdered their father. Someone killed him because of his political views. And there's a degree of evil there, and a degree of trauma there that is greater than just, if he had died in a car accident or natural causes, heart attack or something. It's just awful. I I am at the end of my words here. I just want to convey to you, and I hope you understand. We hurt on our side. We really do, because he was a good man. I had my criticisms of him from time to time, technical things usually, and I'm not going to labor them here because I will not speak ill of the recently dead, because there were really nothing. And it's one thing to criticize someone you disagree with occasionally, especially on the right, and we can criticize each other for, I don't like this person's view, and I encourage criticism for myself. If you don't like what I have to say, I have a number of listeners who write in, hey, loved your show, didn't like this. Okay, I mean, I'm not here to BS you. I'm here to tell you what I think is true. And if you disagree, you can disagree. That's fine. I'm not going to, patronize you by telling you what you want to hear, and that kind of thing. So anyway, Shoe on Head, who, aside from her ongoing anti-Semitism, which is a really sad thing, she'd be really great if she wasn't an anti-Semite. Um, Racism really unbecoming. But she was crying on screen. She's a mother too. She's a lefty, but no fan of Charlie Kirk. But it's unbelievable the way this is all played out. It's horrifying. Um, and it's good to see, though, that there are still some decent people out there. Bill Maher called it out, violence, this kind of thing. Now, you have other responses, people celebrating, what have you. You can't celebrate this thing, and then they're left talking about how we're going after people who are critical of Charlie Kirk. They're not being critical of Charlie Kirk. They're celebrating terrorism. Right. And, if your employer knows that you're celebrating terrorism, that's not a good look for your employer. But there's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech means you don't get arrested for saying what you say. The government cannot come to you and arrest you and take away your liberties for the things that you say. but that does not protect you from the consequences. If you're a business owner, people can choose not to patronize your business because of your political views. And if you are a business owner who employs someone whose political views are driving your customers away, you have a right to get rid of them too. And that goes back to the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Um, I mean, this guy's been losing ratings on his show. Like he had an audience of 1 million, then dropped to about 250,000. When your ratings go down like that, you don't stay on the air. Like, why is this guy still on the air? That this controversy could even happen. He's spreading misinformation. He spread the lie, claiming that this guy who shot Charlie Kirk was someone who was a right winger, when in fact he's a young guy who had a trans boyfriend. Came from a conservative family, and it must be terrible for that family. Can't imagine how they feel. His father was the one who turned him in. That must have been a very difficult thing to do, but it was the right thing to do, and the morally correct decision. So Kimmel gets, there was pressure, the FCC going after him. Now, I, you know, I don't know that the FCC should be trying to get people off the air and that kind of thing. But the fact is, the show should have been canceled a long time ago. So ABC canceled the show, and then they put it back on. It's like I'm actually kind of happy about it, because it's like now they've just wasted a primetime hour, a primetime spot where they could actually have someone who has ratings, who actually has a popular show, and instead they've got this loser on, whose audience is disappearing. So there's that. But you freedom of speech just means you don't get arrested. It doesn't mean you're free from the consequences, and so there's much craziness out there. It's just sickening, my friends. It is absolutely sickening. And I would have felt the same way if it had been some lefty who'd been killed. Um, and I would be condemning that just as strongly. I don't want any of those people killed. I want them, the people that I disagree with in this country, I want them to lose office. I don't want them to have power. I want them to become politically irrelevant. And I want them to watch as we drive this country in a better direction. I don't want any harm to come to them. And so this is the sickening thing. So, God, I can't believe Charlie Kirk is gone. I loved flipping through my videos and seeing little clips of him arguing this and arguing that. He and Ben Shapiro too. And I've criticized both of them. We have our differences. I work for a living, my friends. I'm a landsman, so I don't have the luxury to go to these college campuses. But I don't know that I could be that polite. I don't know that I could do what Charlie Kirk did. He was a unique and blessed individual to do what he was able to do, and to do it so well. I wrote a poem you can find on Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. It's the pinned poem in tribute to Charlie Kirk, where I compared him to Hyperides. Hyperides was a Greek orator, an Athenian orator who was well known trying to encourage Athenians to rise up for their independence from Macedonian rule in the years after Alexander the Great's death. I searched high and low for a classical figure to compare him to, because Charlie Kirk was really unique. There are not many talented people like him who can do what he did. Anyway, if you want to read the poem, I've had lots of positive response. It's on Mensch-Kight Geopolitics on X. Look up Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Follow, please. I don't get as much interaction with the show. I get a lot more interaction with the show as a podcast than I do on social media, which is fine. I just, but please, go and follow, and you can get the news updates that I have. Anyway, so it's a heartfelt tribute, and most I could do was, draft a poem. I really put some thought into it. I love classical poetry, the style of Byron and Tennyson, Edgar Allan Poe, and we, Charles Mackay and Milton. We have some great English poets out there, English speaking poets. Poe obviously an American, but we have some great English speaking poets out there, and they have a great classical style, and so classical English poetry, English language poetry. So there you go. Goodbye, Charlie Kirk. You'll be missed. Yeah, I would say he believes he's in a better place, and he goes with our love, and we will miss him, but we will also continue to cherish his memory, and we will continue to act in his good name. The cause of righteousness will march forward. With Charlie Kirk, it just reminds me that that great theme we see throughout Torah. Howbeit your 10 will put 100 to flight. Uh, your 100 will put 1,000 to flight. Your 1,000 will put 10,000 to flight. There is something very powerful about one righteous person, one righteous individual, or a small number who stand up and just say, "This is right, and what you're doing is wrong." And you can, you're free to do what you want to do. I can't stop you, but I'm going to tell you what's right. There's something powerful about that. And Charlie Kirk is a really great example of that, because he put that one man put 10,000 to flight. The left just could not defeat him. They couldn't argue with him. Um, he he defeated their arguments, and that is an incredible thing. But he'll be remembered. Sadly, I can't make the whole podcast about him. I do have to move on. I only have a few thoughts I'm going to share on American politics before I go into the Israel. There's so much to say about Israel, um, and it's a sad enough time. A couple of things. I always like to get ahead of trends and tell you guys what's happening. That foreshadows what's coming down the road. That's how I'm your prophet of things to come. In the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial races, we have Mike Ciattarelli and we have Earl Sears, is running in Virginia. Just incredible candidates. This is an example. We've really recruited some good Republicans to run. People worth voting for. And we're seeing that in the early voting, Republicans are up 5% from where they were in 2024. Now, that may not sound so awesome or so incredible as it actually is. So let me explain to you why that is incredible real quick, and then you'll understand what it foreshadows. When a given party wins the presidency, there's immediately these off-year gubernatorial elections in New Jersey and Virginia, right? They're the 1 year right after the presidential election. 2020, you have an election for these governors. 2021, you have presidential election. 2024, you have these elections. 2025. Well, last time around, Biden was elected president. The Biden administration, of course, was not very popular in the first year of their administration. They had already tanked. And we saw while in New Jersey there was an incumbent running for re-election. In Virginia, we saw Neil Youngkin win. And of course, his opponent also had some scandals and some stuff. But, in any case, the Republicans had an advantage. Typically, the party that is not in the White House has the advantage when it comes to these gubernatorial races in the first off year. So what would we expect in this? Well, Donald Trump won the presidency. He should be more than mildly unpopular by now, just in the normal course of politics. Therefore, the Democrats should be outperforming their 2024 results, right? Obviously, in a normal year, I would say, the Dems should be up 10% in early voting. Their candidates, these are blue states, their candidates should be way ahead. It shouldn't be close, right? This should be a slam dunk. This should be an easy deal, over and done with, right? And yet, Republicans are outperforming their 2024 numbers in New Jersey and Virginia. Now, if that doesn't foreshadow the future, I don't know what does. Wow, so that's quite a thing. You see that in these states, the polls are within the margin of error, right? Ciattarelli's just a couple points behind his opponent. Winsome Earl Sears, she's just a few points down. It's getting really close. These elections shouldn't be close, my friends. These should be a slam dunk. Democrats should be in the bag, right? This isn't one in the bag, two in the bush, right? This should be done and over with, and it's not. And the reason it's not is because the Democrats are 26% approval rating. Just tells you how bad they're doing. And I just wanted to talk about that because that has implications for 2026. Between the redistricting in the House and the unpopularity of the Democrat Party. I mean, at this point, Republicans would win re-election in the House, win a majority in the House if the Democrats had 5-point advantage in House races in 2026. So the Democrats need like a 7 to 10% advantage over Republicans in order to win, and majority. And it doesn't look like they're going to have it. At this point, Republicans continue to lead. So it's not a good time for them. With that, there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's the shutdown happening now. The 100,000 federal employees who took the deal, the early retirement deal, or payout deal that they were offered, are leaving the federal government finally. And with the shutdown, President Trump has said, look, in any of these programs we don't like, if their employees deemed non-essential, they'll just be fired, and they won't return to work. Right. That's that. So we could radically downsize the government. As usual, big government shutdown and yawn. Nobody cares. It really doesn't make a big difference. We should shut down the government more often. It's one of those things, where I'm having a problem with the government. Have you tried shutting it down and turning it back on? Close it and reopen it. So maybe we should unplug it and plug it back in. I don't know. At this point, the federal government is so lost and such a disaster, such a train wreck. Anyway, but the Dems were demanding healthcare benefits for illegals and, a couple other things. Tell me that you want to lose the election without telling me you don't want to lose the election. I mean, that is so unpopular an issue. I mean, if you look at, do Americans want illegals to have access to our social welfare system? A vast majority of Americans do not. Strongly oppose that. So non-starter issue, not the hill to die on. If they wanted to find an issue, that they could really, gain with or grow, they should have found some way to play along with the cuts or whatever and say, hey, we're going to help trim the government. I mean, that would have made them more popular. But anyway, I'm glad they're doing it the wrong way. I'm not going to complain. We're hearing lots of news about the economy slowing and jobs numbers being below expectations. Well, expectations are just a guess at where they're going to be. The economy is evolving. It is transitioning from one thing to another. It was a largely government-driven, with the, oppressive taxes and this kind of thing. And it is transitioning into a growing economy with a larger number of manufacturing jobs and things of that nature. We have all these trillions of dollars of investment that have been promised from private companies and foreign countries that are coming into the U.S. The prospect for the future is good. But at this moment, there's, as we're transitioning, as those investments are being made and the initial stages, and slowly we'll plan to build things, some things look like they're a little slow. Now, if you want a real crisis to worry about with the economy, it's something like $600 billion in unrealized losses that are facing the banking industry and mortgages and loans right now. That's a lot of money. And like 2/3 of that, $400 billion, is held by local banks. So our banking system is hanging by a thread, and the Fed doesn't want to cut rates. The rate cuts that could help bring those banks back to life and help them mitigate those losses and slowly build a better portfolio of investments and loans. We don't have that yet. So, I mean, they're literally risking the economy because, Orange Man bad. That's a real crisis. That's a real problem. So there's something to watch. There's something we need to be paying attention to. With that, I'll discuss domestic politics more in the future. Right now, I think is kind of where things are. This the terrorism and God, people you can't just shoot people because you disagree with them. It's not how life is supposed to work. With that, I will close this segment, and I'll be back with the Israeli news shortly. You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics with Isaac Kite. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. Now you're messing with a son of a mensch. Well, my friends, Greta Thunberg is back in the news. These people, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Um, First it was, climate change, and now it's free Palestine. And, you know, uh, so, she's got another flotilla that went down there, actually organized by an organization called Samud, which is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and thus Hamas. So basically, it was the Hamas flotilla. And they brought no aid. Like, there was no aid on the ships whatsoever. When the Israeli Navy showed up, they threw their phones in the ocean because, that's environmentally friendly. And they accomplished nothing. It's absolutely stupid. Uh, and you have Greta Thunberg out there talking about, I was abused by my Israeli captors. They mistreated me so horribly. Yeah, I'm going to go with what Meghan McCain said, of course, John McCain's daughter, when she commented that her definition of abused in enemy captivity and Greta Thunberg's definition don't quite match. And given former Senator McCain, the late Senator John McCain's experiences at the Hanoi Hilton, I'm going to go with Meghan McCain on that. This is just ridiculous. I mean, what a little wimp. She's complaining about, there were bed bugs in the bed. On that note, Israeli bed bugs have filed an official protest. They say that Greta Thunberg was filthy and disgusting and unworthy of eating, and they are ashamed that they had to be in the same room with Greta Thunberg. So, there are two sides to every story, you see, my friends. In all good humor, I mean, the only thing I think of these days when I hear Greta Thunberg's name, as do most of the people in my circle of friends, is Ricky Gervais, because he was at the Golden Globe something or other, one of these Hollywood shows, and he's up there, as the host. He's talking about the people like, get up here, thank your God, thank your agent, and F off. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And he's like, you people are unqualified to speak about the world. Most of you spent less time at school than Greta Thunberg. And I love that routine. That's just, it's funny. And it just shows you that we live in this world where ignorance is celebrated. They took this young woman who was an autistic young woman. I'm a little autistic myself, and I found it deeply offensive that they would take her and abuse her by putting her out there in public, even though she has no knowledge about anything. Now, autistic people like myself can be very bright. It's part of why I'm able to memorize a lot of the things I can. Basically, the parts of our brains that would most people fill up with social knowledge about their friends, family, and whatever, we fill up with everything else because we don't really pay much attention to people, but we pay attention to objects. So yes, autistic people can be very bright, but just having a bunch of facts and information doesn't make you intelligent. Right? It's seeing the patterns. That's why IQ is a measure of pattern recognition in large part, because it's the ability to take all that information and use it for something. So they took this poor girl who was uneducated, undereducated, not properly well-rounded and all this kind of thing from, very well-to-do parents in Sweden, a very comfortable situation, and put her out there in front of the world to be heaped abuse upon and insulted and, go out and make a complete fool of herself for this climate change. How dare you? Like she's some kind of medieval saint. Now, at least with the martyrdom of medieval saints, your Jeanne d'Arc and some of your other medieval saints, they were celebrated figures in their time for spreading religious messages, moral messages, telling people to behave themselves. Right. And of course, we have Greta Thunberg, who's out there, lambasting us for, giving us the first and second and third degree for all of our immoral climate injustice against the world. I prefer the Catholic saints myself. At least they had morality on their side. But, I mean, Greta Thunberg is, again, she's this kid that who knows if she hadn't been given this false cause and been put up to be abused in that way. And, that, maybe she could have been something better. But now, she's a laughing stock and an embarrassment to all autistic people. And you're bigging on a job. Yeah, she's like 26 now. I mean, she's not a kid. And I don't care. I mean, stupid people are stupid people. Anyway, and these people are just wow. The green-red alliance was weird enough, right? Because, you had people who were for the workers and didn't give a damn about the environment getting together with the greenies, or for the environment, we got to save the planet. And that was weird enough. The green-red Islamofascist alliance, talk about strange bedfellows. I mean, wow. It's like in fundamentalist Islam, what's practiced in Gaza, right? Women are treated worse than livestock. Like, livestock are treated with more respect than women are. You would never kill your livestock prematurely, but, they'll do honor killings against women. I mean, it's completely uncivilized behavior. And I can say that because I hold everyone to the same standard. I don't just say, well, brown-skinned people are obviously not as civilized, not as developed or evolved as us, so they can be barbarians, but, they can do things I would never tolerate white people doing because white people are just so much better than everyone. God, I'm sorry, my friends. It makes me sick even hearing those words come out of my mouth sardonically here. The fact is, these people are so bigoted and so backwards and all of that they hate all of us, the rest, so much that they will make common cause with people who are the opposite of them. I mean, if Greta Thunberg had made it to Gaza, she'd been lucky to make it out of there alive. And considering how women were treated at the Nova Festival, being raped, tortured, and murdered, it would be unspeakably horrible if she had made it to Gaza. No one deserves that, not even Greta Thunberg. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So that is, the irony of the situation, maybe. Anyway, I try to have a sense of humor about these things. When people hate me, I try to laugh at them. And we Jews have a good sense of humor about these things. The Inquisition, what a show! The Inquisition, here we go. But the fact is, they hate us, and they want us to die. This is how I ended up losing a friend. Was I lost a woke friend last year. Like I said, I won't play along with the trans nonsense, and so that friend won't talk to me anymore. Now I've got another friend I've lost because she was spreading anti-Semitic propaganda, back to this, Israel runs America nonsense. And I tried to explain to her that jeopardizes my life. Like, spreading that stuff says kill Jews. And it's like, that's me, that's my wife, that's my 7 children. They're just children. But we could be killed because people are spreading that kind of garbage. So if you're spreading stuff that says kill the Jews, you're not a friend of mine. So I called her out for that, talked about that being racism and bigotry, and now she won't talk to me. So I have no more friends on the left. I had a few, and now they have cut me off or, crossed certain lines that even I can't tolerate. They don't do themselves any good. I mean, they're isolating themselves. And then, it's like, if we don't talk, they're just going to keep being more deluded and more isolated socially. And we're all going to move on with our lives because we are. I mean, I don't care what people's politics are. I don't care who's gay, straight, whatever. My friends are my friends, and that's that. But when, they want to, when they're promoting propaganda that could get me killed, yeah, that's not how a friend behaves. Anyway, so, we really need to chill out, people. I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys are already on the right side of things. I do have some listeners I know who are center left. If you're in the sort of John Fetterman space, and there's a lot of people there, I really feel bad for you guys. I mean, the Democrat Party is crumbling. Anyway, the anti-Semitism. I mean, if you're on the left and you believe in left-wing values, you have political ideas. Like, you have a right to disagree with Donald Trump and people on the right and Christian conservatives and whoever. I mean, we all live here and we debate and we discuss and we come up with solutions. But if you're over on that side and you're watching, these nutterballs out there hijacking your message, whew, I mean, we get a little bit of that with the woke right, but I mean, they're highly marginalized. And there's a big difference between, the huge chunk of people who follow popular out there in public, and especially in the blue cities, who follow the woke left versus, there's only a handful of people who follow the woke right. Some people, a lot more people listen to them, but they don't follow them. But the woke right doesn't have an audience that is dedicated to their ideology like the left does. So anyway, I wanted to make a note about humor. Had an argument with a guy, he's a veteran, so I was trying to be respectful. I'm always respectful toward my fellow veterans. And, we were going back and forth about something. I was talking about Trump and Ukraine, which I'll talk about later, but it's like I've been right about that issue since the beginning. So I feel a certain obviously, and all of the experts from, Russia experts from Stephen Kotkin and Victor Davis Hanson and everyone, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, like all of these experts on, H.R. McMaster, all the people who are experts on Russia, who know anything about geopolitics today, are on my side. Say that Russia are the bad guys, Ukraine are the good guys. That's, the way to win this is to make Russia stop. And Trump pursued a foolish and ridiculous policy, which I'm going to talk about later. So I was arguing with this, and he's suggesting that somehow I should just trust the president. And, when I said, no, I'm not going to trust the president, every expert agrees with me. I was right from the beginning. I haven't been wrong on this issue. And, the president was just, he behaved stupidly. He really did. And that's my opinion. And the guy's like, well, I know your type. You're arrogant and all this kind of thing. And, you call yourself the shadow president. My friends, especially those of you who've been here a while, that was a joke. Like, have a sense of humor. During the Biden administration, when I started the show, Biden had just come to office. I would comment on American policy, and I had a couple of you guys writing in saying, God, Isaac, I wish you were president or someone who thinks like you, and this kind of thing. And so that kind of evolved into the joke of my being the shadow president because, why not? And the policies I was pitching were obviously better. I'm not running for president. It's just a comic thing. It's become part of, your lovable lawnsman, gregarious Vulcan, right? Prophet of things to come. It's in the vein of, Rush Limbaugh's thing about, half my brain tied behind my back, the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies, that kind of stuff. It's just funny stuff. And this guy was attacking me for it. I'm like, a lot of bad things have happened in the past from people who just trust their leaders. All right. Just trust Herr Führer, trust Il Duce, trust the Vosht, right? No, I don't trust people. All right. Now, I agree with Donald Trump on 98% of things. Right. And I voted for him 3 times proudly. I've supported him for a long time. Right. And, if I'd supported someone else, if someone else were president and I, voted for them, what have you, I'd be criticizing them too. If the Democrats had won, I'd be criticizing them too. Where I have disagreements, where I think people are doing something wrong, I'm going to say so. And that's, like I said, I'm not here to tell you guys what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what I think is right and true. And if you agree with me, great. If not, it's fine. Like I said, and you guys email in all the time. Hey, I thought this was good and that was good. I think you're off base on this, but I understand your position. That's my point. You will always understand where I'm coming from. Okay. Anyway, let's put that to one side. So much Israeli news to go on. I just please, people, we really in this country need to have a better sense of humor. We need to be friendlier. We need to be able to talk with one another and, not, break up friendships of many years. And, it's like, it's hard when you care for someone and then they just turn on you like that. And it's one thing to be like, well, I just don't like you anymore. Let's not hang out anymore. But, you're spreading, lies that could injure my family. Like anyway. Okay. we need to chill out. We need to be friends again. We need to be family again. We are a country, right? And these people are cutting off their family and their friends and whatever, and anyone who disagrees with them. It's horrifying. Anyway, not going good places. So, Israel. So once again, Donald Trump has put together, we had Trump, we've had several other people, institutions, put together potential ceasefires and peace agreements and what have you. And Trump put forward another one. I was optimistic. And I don't want to call it naive optimism because it's not naive. I mean, Donald Trump does this very strategically. It creates incredible optics, right? You have this peace plan where, there's genocide in Gaza, but, since when could you, name a group of people who've been subject to a genocide, victims of a genocide, who could have ended it by giving up hostages and surrendering their weapons, right? I mean, it's unheard of. Nowhere in history has that ever happened. And once again, peace plan put forward and rejected. And Hamas was trying to play the game. Well, we accept some of it, but we're gonna keep our weapons. We'll be part of the transitional government after the war is over. And it's like, no, no, you won't. Right? Just imagine. All right. Now, people actually did try to do this. Just imagine. Okay, it's May 9th. Well, the official surrender happened on May 8th. So let's go back to May 7th. 1945. The Vice Fuhrer, Admiral Dönitz, has now been elevated to Fuhrer because Hitler's dead. Good riddance. And so Dönitz he's a true believer in the Nazi cause. Actually, there's some great British comic skits about when Dönitz became Fuhrer. It's like, hail me, and then he finds out that basically they just need him to surrender. It's like, this is great stuff. Again, you have to have a good sense of humor. Okay, so Admiral Dönitz calls up Ike Eisenhower and he says, hey, so here's what we're going to do. We'll surrender. We'll give up our weapons. We'll cut the Wehrmacht down to a certain size and set up a transitional government. And the Nazi Party will be a coalition partner in the post-war government. Right? I mean, we've, slaughtered 6 million Jews, started a war that killed 70 million people. We've massacred Russians and Poles and you name it. We've done it. Roma, homosexuals, communists, anybody we don't like. We've killed, people with disabilities and all of this kind of thing, right? We've done all these horrible things, but we'll sit in the transitional government. I mean, could you even imagine Ike Eisenhower willing to entertain so ridiculous a notion? I mean, such a thing wouldn't even have gotten its way back to Roosevelt. I mean, he's like, no, unconditional surrender. You surrender, we'll take charge of the country, and we will decide what happens to Germany after the war. You guys lost. You guys are evil. You guys caused destruction and mass murder and all of this kind of thing. In fact, moreover, not only are you guys going to surrender, you are criminals like Admiral Dönitz and Rudolf Hess and all of you. You are going to trial. Hermann Goering, all of you are going to trial. And with Goering, I mean, one of the higher up officers there, head of the Luftwaffe and part of the guy. I mean, all of these guys were part of this evil cabal. So no, Hamas will not be part of the transitional government after the war is over. Hamas will be gone. Like Hamas will surrender and they will be gone. There was part of it that would have allowed a guarantee of safe passage for Hamas leaders to leave Gaza, right? They give up their weapons, they return the hostages and the corpses. We think about 20 of the 48 remaining unaccounted for persons who are held hostage in Gaza. We believe if 20 of them are alive. So we're looking for probably, God, we can hope 20 warm bodies. God, if it were more than that, that'd be a bloody miracle. I'd love to see more, but about 20 warm bodies and 28 corpses. But at least those people can then come home. The bodies can be buried appropriately in Jewish cemeteries, and the family can have that moment of saying goodbye and, knowing what happened to their relative who was lost. And the 20 who are alive-ish, like I said, it would be wonderful if there were more, can go back to trying to be alive after 2 years in captivity. But No, Hamas would not accept this deal. It's also out there. I just want to take a side note. I mean, the Saudis have been talking about normalizing relations with Israel and joining the Abraham Accords, right? Bahrain, the UAE, they're already in on it. Kosovo, Morocco, they have normalized relations with Israel, although Turkey's become increasingly, militantly Islamic state of late, and Turkey has had normal relations with Israel for some time. So there are Muslim countries that have normal relations with Israel. And then, of course, the countries that Israel has made peace with, Jordan, Egypt, so on and so forth, they have normal relations with them. And Lebanon is talking about going in the same direction. So, Israel has normal relations with other countries, and the UAE and Bahrain are also, with this whole Abraham Accord thing, sort of, allies of Israel against Iran. Right. And so Israel can regard them as not only normalized relations, but also as friends and partners. The Saudis have considered joining that, but their precondition for membership is the destruction of Hamas. Right. Hamas must be destroyed. And we've been talking about this for a while, that geostrategically, Israel has to prove its value to the Arabs. Right. And, they certainly have, as I talk about here in just a minute, the way the geopolitical situation has changed since October 7th, 2023, certainly shows Israel's value. But finishing off Hamas is absolute necessity, and that's extremely important. So that has to happen. Hamas has to go. We've offered them the opportunity to surrender and get out. Now, Trump, with all the positive optics of, hey, we had a peace deal, he can tell Israel, rain fire. Go finish the job. Whack them. There are other tribes and groups in Gaza. I like, Ryan Macbeth talks about this all the time. There are no good guys. I mean, they're not people there. These alternatives to Hamas are not people that you and I would like, but they are people who have interests that differ from Hamas. And so there are a couple of tribes in different parts of Gaza who have been killing off the Hamas operatives in their area and assuming control for themselves. That's out of self-interest and what have you. But any transition away from Hamas is good. Even a step or two steps in the right direction is better than nothing. But Hamas has to go. There's talk of a transitional government led by Tony Blair. Tony Blair. Awesome. I love it. I really liked, when I was younger, I really liked Tony Blair's government. It was a brilliant opportunity that he found, because John Major's government, the conservative government, the Tories, had moved away from Margaret Thatcher's economic policies in the years after her unceremonious departure from politics. And Tony Blair said, hey, what if we marry Margaret Thatcher's very popular economic policies with the labor agenda, working people and education and benefits and this kind of thing. And he did it very well. And so Britain had a prosperous economy, and they had their sort of welfare state. Not what I support, but I mean, when you want to win elections, so he won big in 97 and managed to win re-election in 2001 and 2005, eventually with Maggie Thatcher's support. And when the Tories came back under David Cameron, it was rather to the disappointment of a lot of people, because they didn't bring back the Margaret Thatcher policies. We may see reform go in that direction, but I mean, apparently the major parties aren't interested in that. Anyway, but Tony Blair, I never agreed with him on his Europe policy, but I really liked that marriage of sort of center-left politics with free market economics. It's brilliant. Bill Clinton did something similar, although that was mostly, he would talk a good talk in that direction and compromise with the Republicans when he had to. But when it came down to it, the healthcare plan they put out in the first years of their administration, the Clinton administration was not free market. He could talk a moderate talk, but all of his administration were far left people. And so, if it hadn't been for the Republican takeover of Congress in 94, yeah, he probably would have continued to the left. All right. But Tony Blair is an internationally respected figure. He's definitely somebody who knows how to run a government, an elder statesman. He certainly won't be in Gaza I hope not, because security for him would be awful trying to maintain that. But he could help lead a transition to something other than Hamas. And he's also very much a realist. So he'll work with these tribes and other groups that are there, and you meet them where they're at and start working towards something better. And as I've mentioned, in a couple of generations, if they can live in some way other than the way they're living now, if they can become more civilized and, let go of their racism and behave. I mean, other Arabs have done it. Bahrain, the UAE, the Saudis, right? I mean, when we hold everyone to the same standards of civilization, we see that Arabs are perfectly capable of achieving that. Like there is no racial disparity, right? Jews and Arabs are both equally capable of being civilized, intelligent, and decent people, right? It can happen. We see that is possible. So when and we've seen that Jews aren't perfect people either. Sometimes we have people who misbehave, and we punish them. That's how you maintain a civilized society. Psychopaths have to be punished, and murderers. But when you live in a society that is incredibly racist, that puts psychopaths in power, and that promotes mass murder, well, we can't live with those people. Okay. So, quick note, I did talk a little bit about politics. I'll have to talk about Israeli politics more another time. There's a lot to say. I want to go into sort of defending Israel and a few quick points there, because I have had a few of you guys ask, and I get that. But it's difficult, but you have people who are so emotionally tied to hate. But so Bibi, as I said, I mean, the judgment on Bibi, the verdict, if you will, on Bibi will come after the war. The war is getting close to its end. So now we're starting to see the beginnings of what is really important. And like I said, Naftali Bennett has been incredibly popular of late because he presents a right-wing voice who would adopt Bibi's policies, the popular policies that Bibi endorses, but who is not Bibi Netanyahu. He's clearly an alternative. Gidon Sa'ar was trying to do that. Sa'ar is back in Likud, Bibi's party. But Sa'ar is known moderate. He's built a career mostly to the left of Bibi. And so, on the right, I mean, I would say he's a left winger, but within Likud, he's been kind of to the left of Bibi. This was the funny joke that we had back in 2009, 2010. Sylvan Shalom tried to rebrand himself as this staunch right winger, and it's like, this was a guy who built his whole career being to the left of Bibi, and then all of a sudden wants us to believe he's to the right of Bibi now, and a staunch defender of the right wing cause. And it's like, buddy, why should we believe you? Your track record does not, your track record does not track, let's just say. Anyway, same kind of thing with Sa'ar. So Naftali Bennett convinces people that he is really right of center. Like he has the real policies of Bibi Netanyahu, and people are convinced that he would endorse those, the free market policies, the defensive policies, and that kind of thing, but is not Bibi. And doesn't come with Bibi's particular drawbacks. And that's very popular right now. So that's still there. So my analysis, as I said last time, remains the same. Bibi and this government will probably go full term. Now, they've got about 14 more months they can go. There have to be elections at the end of next year, the end of 2026 at the latest. Now, if I were Bibi, assuming that this kind of ends in the next few months, I'd be looking to have elections in the summer or in the autumn, not wait the whole time. But basically, sometime in 2026, there will be elections. There will have to be. Right now, if the conflict continues or there's more chaos or there's more problems, that election will probably wait until later in 2026. But they got till December. So they have to hold an election before then. And then the Knesset can choose a new government. And my analysis, like I said last time, Bibi will probably, his government will hold on for the full term, approximately, until late summer, early fall elections or something like that. And this is probably Bibi's last term. If Bibi were going to survive this, if he had a chance at re-election, I think we'd see that now. I think we'd see the signs. I don't think Naftali Bennett would be polling at 27 seats. I don't think we'd be where we are. So that's my assertion. Now, I could be wrong. It's been known to happen. When it comes to Israeli politics, and if you've been following the show for a while, you'll know that I'm generally not wrong. I was in the Knesset, volunteering there for a little while, and I got to learn some of the culture there and some of the inside baseball and kind of how things work. And when you live among Israelis, you get to learn their political culture and understand it. So, I don't just pull these things out of thin air, right? There is distinctly a that I have a good reason to believe what I have told you guys. So, like I said, I think Bibi is probably done. We'll see. That said, I mean, he's got his criminal trials, and I don't know how he'll deal with those once he leaves office as prime minister. I mean, he's already in court. Had to go to court several times. They're going to put those cases forward. My assertion would be the best deal for everyone is that the Knesset should just pass a pardon for him and let him go. Like, here's the deal. Bibi agrees to retire. They pass a pardon. All that stuff goes away, and he just goes into retirement. Because ultimately, those court cases were designed to take him out of office. Like, it was designed to sully his name and make him unelectable and get him out of office. It hasn't worked. And there's been this war and all this kind of thing. Just let it go. Just pardon him and let him go. And of course, that pardon has to be upheld by the courts, because, if the courts try to overturn the pardon, they've been, messing around with Israeli politics and damaging the Israeli system, because, this system is intended to be democratic, and the courts have, blocked popular reforms put forward by the Knesset. It's a sovereign parliament. You can't do that. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But that's where we're at in terms of Israeli politics. I'll go into more depth and more detail in the future. Right now, I'm already going to run long with this episode. Defending Israel. A couple of thoughts that you can ask people. A lot of people bring up the Mufti al-Husseini thing, and I think there's value to that. I like to point out to people that not only was Haj Amin al-Husseini an ally of Hitler's, he helped raise the Hanshar division, a division of Bosnian Muslims who fought who were a Waffen-SS division, a mountain division. They have quite a history. So several good books out about them. I really find it fascinating to read some of these there's so many stories in the Second World War. But to read about that, because the history of the Balkans is not very well understood by Americans and people in the West in general. And you really get a feel for the complexities of the ethnic interactions there and that kind of thing. So it is really interesting to learn about. But in any case, there's this division of Bosnian Muslims, and they went around, clearing out Jews and Serbian rebels and Croats, and committed a number of war crimes and this was an SS division, right? It's Waffen SS. So it's like SS soldiers, but still, and they did all these horrible things. And then after the war, they were, of course, disbanded. And upon being disbanded, several of their leaders moved to the British Mandate of Palestine to escape prosecution for their actions, because of course they knew that they had the Mufti al-Husseini there, who had raised the division in the first place. So now you have these former Nazi SS, Waffen SS soldiers serving the Nazis, and now they're in the British Mandate of Palestine, leading the Arab resistance to the Jews, the attempted genocide, what they call the Nakba, them trying to kill the Jews and us not dying, which is, of course, the story of the founding of Israel, essentially, in a nutshell. So the Palestinians, the PLO was literally founded by Nazis, right? So I shared a meme around the Palestinian flag with the swastika on it. And it's like, Uh, People on the left you're like, oh my God, Trump is literally Hitler. Find out that the Palestinians cause is founded by the Nazis, and then they're like, free Palestine. I mean, just wow. Anyway, Hitler's still very popular among the Palestinians. There are stores there that sell T-shirts with swastikas on them, and his book is very popular there. So it's crazy, my friends. It's crazy. Anyway, so that's issue number one, I think, is to talk about that. Then there's all this. I mean, look, Israel has tried to make peace on every occasion that there's been such an opportunity, right? I mean, Israel made peace with Jordan, made peace with Egypt, made peace with, they're trying to make peace with Lebanon, anyone they can make peace with. And they've bent over backwards, given up territory, withdrew from Gaza completely. And now, the whole war is Israel's fault. That's a point that I think needs to be made. You get these people with this colonization thing. So I like to start that with, so where are Arabs from? Right? And people, what? And because they get this idea that Arabs are from the Middle East, right? Well, they come from the Middle East. I'm like, where in the Middle East, right? So people of Iran are mostly Persians, right? And you have Armenians and you have Turks and you have, all these different groups in the Middle East. Where are the Arabs from? And people usually look at you askance like, what? No brain things happening in their head. The two brain cells that they have are not rubbing together. So, then you say, there's this place called Arabia. Funny thing, the Arabs are from Arabia. Arabia is a peninsula that does not include Israel or Jordan or Syria or Lebanon, etc., etc. Why are there Arabs living there? Just like England is a significant chunk of an island in Europe. So why is there a New England in the Americas? Why are there English-speaking people living in Kansas, right? This is a process we call colonization. So, there were Nabateans, who are considered an Arab tribe, living on the other side of the Jordan in northern Saudi Arabia, near Judea, in the time of the Romans. We have recorded history of the Romans making deals with the Nabateans. It's possible that Muhammad was a Nabatean Arab. There's some back and forth about that. There's a lot of politics and a lot of history. It's just interesting possibility. But the Nabateans are allies of the Romans and so on and so forth. So, but they were outside of Israel, right? All right. In 637, the Caliph Omar, the successor of one of the successors of Muhammad, comes and conquers the Levant, Israel, essentially, and he takes over the region, right? And they kind of ignored it for like 250 years. I mean, the Dome of the Rock was mostly built to appease the Christians living in Syria, which is far more important to them than the Palestinian territory, or, the Roman province of Palestine, which they called after the Philistines to take Judea out of it. But in any case, they took over the region and kind of ignored it. I mean, for the most part, they just kept the Christians happy and other such. But when the Abbasid dynasty took over, when the Umayyad Caliphate gave way to the Abbasids, right? The Umayyad, of course, continued over in Al-Andalus, which we now call Spain. But the Abbasids took over in Baghdad, and during their time, there was much more greater emphasis on the conversion of locals to Islam. All of the people who worked for the government had to be Muslims and this kind of thing. And, well, a lot of Christians and Jews were bureaucrats. Anyway, so it's in that time, right? As we start getting to the 10th century, that's when Arabs started colonizing places like Israel and living there. Now, if people say, well, but they've tested Palestinians and some of them have DNA from the Greeks and whatever. Yeah. There are white Americans who have, 1024th Cherokee Indian, right? The Cherokee Nation. Well, how does that happen? Does that make you Cherokee? right? The culture is Arab, right? The Arabs moved in. Yes, some of them married the locals. They took over the culture. And, people who went by, Stephen became Mahmoud, right? Or Salmin, or, whatever. And so the culture changed. The Arabs came in and conquered genetically and culturally. Okay. So colonization, right? They are the colonizers. Jews have always lived there. And obviously it was Jewish land before that. Like, there's no doubt, no real argument that the Judeans did not live there. Like, it's Jewish stuff all over the place. Like, we're talking about, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like, when Americans arrived in Virginia, they didn't start finding scrolls, 1,000-year-old scrolls written in English, right? Copies of Shakespeare, right? And Beowulf and this kind of thing, right? But we got to the Middle East. There was the Dead Sea Scroll find, and all of a sudden we're finding 2,000-year-old scrolls in Hebrew, right? That we can still decipher. It's this tantamount. It's significantly the same language, the biblical Hebrew that we work with, in religious studies, not modern Hebrew, obviously. Anyway, so the Arabs are colonizers. I also like to talk a lot about the demographics of the Middle East. So I'll make the quick point here. When the British took over, General Allenby came through and conquered Israel when it became the British Mandate of Palestine. In 1917, he drove the Ottomans out of the area and took over, what became Transjordan, British Mandate of Palestine, what they wanted to become Transjordan. Then you had the French take, Syria, Lebanon, these kinds of things after the war, the Sykes-Picot and the League of Nations mandates. That's why it's called Mandatory Palestine, or the Mandate of Palestine. And so the British went with the Roman name. The British, it's like they study Latin and Greek, classical education. Okay, so that's where that name came from. But that state was not an Arab state. There were already like 150,000 Jews living there, right? And about 250,000 Arabs, mostly Arabs. There were about 50,000 Christians. So the population of the region was fairly small. It was a backwater of the Ottoman Empire. There were barely even, there was barely any infrastructure or development there. And so at that point, Jews started moving back in greater numbers. There had been the Balfour Declaration. Jews in Europe had sided with the British in large part because the British had sought out Jewish allies by supporting the idea of a Jewish state. And the Jews were a major constituency of the Republican Party in America, in the United States of America at the time. So when Warren G. Harding won the presidency as of 1921, all of a sudden American policy switched from an anti-Jewish state of the Wilson years to a pro-Jewish state. We actually signed a treaty with Britain that would guarantee a Jewish state within the borders of what is now Israel, with the exception of the Golan Heights that Israel obviously captured during the 1967 Six-Day War. But the territory that is Israel, Gaza, the Judea and Samaria, which the international community erroneously calls the West Bank, all of that territory, the United States signed a treaty with Britain that all would be a Jewish state, right? And from then, various plans were put forward. We'll split it this way, we'll split it that way. Meanwhile, through the 1920s and 1930s, Jews started moving back in greater numbers. So about, depending on which numbers you're using, the British figured about 600,000 Jews moved to Israel by 1948, 1947, 1948, but the last census that the British took there. So during the same time frame, about 400,000 Arabs also moved in. These were Egyptians, Syrians, Saudis, Iraqis, Lebanese, right? Because the Jews brought with them economic prosperity. Right? We built Tel Aviv, a brand new city north of Yaffo on sand dunes. And all of a sudden there was vitality. Economic activity was, people were making money. The British, of course, institute free market policies wherever they went in their empire. And so it was a prosperous time. They were growing fruit. They were doing some minor manufactures, and, they had smart people. And of course, Jews are industrious and intelligent. So Arabs went there to work. Some went there to displace Jews and fight Jews. But the Arab population also went up 400,000 people. So you get a point where basically the Arab and Jewish populations were almost equal, right, at that point in 1947, but not because those were native Arabs living there. First of all, Arabs had already colonized the region, so this is a colonial culture, right? Number one. And number two, many of these people had moved there from these other countries. So you would think rationally, when the war started, the Arabs told Arab villagers and people living in the region to leave, right? First of all, so again, there were several partition plans put forward leading up to the UN partition plan, which would have split what is now Israel into two countries, right? So there would be a Jewish state. The Arabs weren't willing to accept that, so they decided on war. They started a war, and when they started that war, they evacuated or told people to leave, right? Not the Israelis, the Zionists, the future Israelis, not the Jews. The Arabs did. Now, in a few cases, the Jews did tell some Arabs to leave certain villages and whatever for strategic reasons. They just could not have Arab populations living behind the lines where Arab soldiers could sneak in and attack from, right? And you get all these people, the Jews massacred people. Well, what would happen is a village would be evacuated. It would be filled with, soldiers, right? Mufti al-Husseini and these Hanshar division-led, Nazi-trained soldiers training these PLO guys. They would take over the village and they would fight the Jews. And when the Jews came to attack, of course, this would be a fierce battle, and most of them would be killed in battle, right? And it's possible in some cases that Jews were a little overzealous about people who were hors de combat, who should have been regarded as wounded or what have you. This is war. I mean, when the Arabs captured Jews, they just killed them. I mean, any Jew was captured, they knew they were dead. A lot of Arabs were captured by the Jews and, treated, like prisoners of war, essentially. So the fact that we would leave anyone alive anywhere makes us morally superior side. Anyway, so these Arabs left on the assumption that the Arabs, including, the Palestinians there, the Jordanian army, the Egyptian army, the Saudis, the Iraqis, the Lebanese, the Syrians, everybody, they were going to come in, they were going to massacre the Jews. Itbach el Yehud. They were going to kill all the Jews, slaughter the Jews. The Jews are our dogs, they said. And those armies came in and the Jews fought back and they lost. One at a time, they were defeated. The Egyptians came under air attack from, you can't make this up, my friends. The first Israeli Air Force were Messerschmitt 109s made in Czechoslovakia under the German occupation government, that, no one wanted them because, obviously they were German planes. They weren't even as good as the German Messerschmitts. They'd been ordered by the Nazis. No one would pay for them. So, Jews bought them privately and flew them, even including some Americans, like American Jews flew to Europe, and got these planes and flew what was illegal for Americans to do, technically, flew to Israel, pilots, and, fought the Egyptians, strafed them and bombed them. So the IAF was born. It's a really harrowing story. I mean, when you learn about the actual ins and outs, the details, get down into the guts of what happened in 1948, it was a close run thing. The Jews fought very desperately, and whether you want to call it the hand of providence, fate, good fortune, or just stalwart unwillingness to surrender, the Israelis won. Having, declared themselves a state, they won. They fought the Arabs to an armistice, and Israel was born. Without Gaza, which was then occupied by Egypt, without Judea and Samaria, which became the West Bank of Jordan. Okay. The point is, right, at that point, all of those Arabs who had fled to Gaza, to Judea and Samaria, at that point, Jordanian occupied West Bank, right? A western bank of the Jordan. And mostly they occupied the territory. The Jordanians took all of that, including half of Jerusalem, not because they didn't want a Jewish state. They did want to get to the coast, actually. It wasn't so much that the Hashemite kingdom didn't want a Jewish state. The Hashemites didn't want a Palestinian state. They took all of that territory to prevent the Palestinians from having it. Anyway, so you get all these people that are in these refugee camps, and they're refugees. And these are people who are from Egypt with names like Arafat, right? Or from Syria with names like Abbas. These are not Palestinian names. Most of the native Palestinian Arabs stayed and become Israeli citizens, where Arab women voted for the first time in 1949 when they held elections, right? There you go. Obviously, the Christian population, now divided between Judea, Samaria, and Israel, most of the Christians would move to Israel, and Israel has been a safe place for Christians ever since. Christians live there freely. I told you, I've seen it. Another discussion for another time. So all of these Arafats and Abbases and what have you, they could have gone back to their countries. There's no reason that a family group named Arafat that are from Egypt and obviously Egyptian couldn't have gone back to Cairo or anywhere else in Egypt and gone back to their lives. The Egyptians could have resettled them back in Egypt. So they're, depending on whom you ask, there's somewhere between 400 and 600,000. Some say 750,000. You know, the Palestinian numbers, the math doesn't add up. Somewhere between 400 and 600,000 people, I'm willing to say, but probably more like 400,000 left Israel. And you have to remember that we're not talking about Gaza or Judea and Samaria, you know, Jordanian occupied West Bank. Those were occupied by Arab countries. There was no Palestinian state in 1948, not because of the Jews, but because Egypt and Jordan did not establish one. Right? Nobody wanted that until it was controlled by Jews, by Israel, and then all of a sudden, oh, we got to take that territory from the Jews. All right, anyway. The point is, those people could have gone home, right? And gone back to their countries. And there might have been maybe 50, 60, 70, 80,000 people who were from the parts of Israel that are not in Gaza and Judea and Samaria. There were more people living in those areas that would come under Israeli control later in the Six-Day War. That's a different matter. My point is, those people could have gone home. So when you get to these people that want to talk about Israel's founding, this is a thing. Marxism, the Marxist religion believes that they can taint a country with the moral depravity of its founder, of its foundation. And this is, or the moral mistakes made in the past. This is kind of interesting. Semites can relate to this because we have a lot of, in our history, whole nations are tainted by the behavior of their founders. So, for example, the Ammonites and the Moabites, the Ammoni and the Moabim, these people, are tainted by the fact that their nation was founded when Lot's daughters, lay with Lot to have sons, right? And so they're the nations of incest. They're called mamzers in Torah, and there's debate over whether, a mamzer is any person born from an incestuous relationship or inappropriate relationship. That's one interpretation. Another is that they're nations. The Ammonites and the Moabites were mamzers. The point is, we're familiar with this idea, but at the same time, this is the modern world. Okay. And people are, well, Americans had slaves. Yes. And we fought a war to end slavery. The British were involved in the slave trade, and they fought a war to end the slave trade. I mean, the Israelis massacred Arabs. There was a war. The Arabs evacuated most of those people who left. The Arabs who left because they were told by other Arabs to go. And then when the Jews weren't killed, they couldn't go back. That's not our fault. Okay? We tried to make peace. So this kind of stuff. When you look at Israel's founding, it was very difficult. It was very tough. The Arabs were, led by Nazis trying to annihilate the Jews. There was no defeat for the Jews. There was only another Holocaust. 2 years after the last one had just ended. Okay? That was prevented by Israel's victory. Israel's victory is clean, pure, right? And you can't argue that 7 million Jews should die today because maybe, people claim that there were, problems at Israel's founding. I love this argument. Ben Shapiro's taken that on a couple of times. Like, we're talking about, Israel's founding and somehow that justifies the murder of Israelis today. And it's like, they're colonizing land. No, they're not. They returned home. If the Maori came back to take over New Zealand, we would celebrate that as native people taking over their country. But when the Jews go home, because we're Jews, we're sniveling, conniving trolls, horns on our heads, we eat blood matzah and have secret space lasers. When we go home, that's bad. And it's okay to make up, blood libels, make up whatever excuse justifies the murder of Jews, and I've had somebody that I considered a friend spreading such lies, jeopardizing my life and that of my children. So these are just a few things. I'll do some more later. I just like to recount these because people need to understand them and realize that it's a load of BS. Okay. The Israelis offered the Palestinians peace in 1999 and 2000 and 2001 and 2005 and 2006, 7, 8. Anytime the Palestinians want peace, they can have peace, but they don't want peace, right? What they want is October 7th, right? That's why all the Arabs in Gaza were jumping around. You watch the videos, they pull Naama Levy out of the back of a Jeep, blood pouring down her pants from her crotch. In pain and agony as they drag her around and throw her in the back seat of the Jeep. People are out there shouting, Allahu Akbar, and they're spitting on her. That's the people celebrate. Oh, they're not celebrating now because their houses have been destroyed and, they're living in tents and Israel has redeveloped Gaza because we have to defend ourselves, okay? This is, things have changed. But still, you start a war, you lose a war, you whine and complain. And as for the things like the right of return and all that shit, a lot of Germans were forced out of East Prussia, right? Königsberg is called Kaliningrad, right? I don't have any tears for the Germans who were forced out of Prussia. It was a horrible story, the way that it happened. When you have, when you support a psychopath to be your leader, those are the kinds of things that happens. I mean, I just don't have any tears. The Japanese colonists who had, big estates in Korea and businesses there and were wealthy and powerful in Korea and in Formosa, now Taiwan, and other Japanese colonies, Manchukuo. I just don't have any tears. I'm not sorry. Okay. These were, empires that were brutal and horrible and started wars of genocide, murdered lots of people, and lost their wars. And when you lose, it hurts, right? Now, did all these people directly participate in what happened? I mean, collective punishment isn't fun, okay? But that's how things work. So when the Palestinians start war after war after war and they lose war after war after war, that's that. So, I mean, at this point, after October 7th, there's no reason for them to have a state. We need 2, maybe 3 generations of Arabs who are not racist. So if right now they made a sudden change, get rid of Hamas, they get a new government, there's a miraculous change. And all of a sudden, they're peace, love, kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya, and everything's peaceful. And there are no more racism. We love the Jews. The Jews are our friends, not our dogs. And, there's this complete turnaround. We'd need 2, maybe 3 generations of that before we can talk about a Palestinian state, okay? Because there's just too much bad blood, and we know that, they would treat statehood as another step in the cause of destroying Israel. They have to recognize Israel as a Jewish state and give up that conflict before this can end. So I know this ran long, and I know this is going to be a long episode. I haven't recorded in a month. I'm so sorry. But that's what happens. I still have a whole other topic to talk about. I'll try to keep it brief. I'll be back after the break. If you're not able to listen to it all at once, that's where you can pause. But I appreciate you guys much and your patience, but I'm trying to get you the good information so that you can win these arguments. And in the next episode, I'll go on with some other arguments and other ways to defend Israel. And, I mean, we'll go into some of that. Oh, you saw a TikTok video of a guy, holding a baby doll. But no, he was holding a baby. You saw that it's a plastic doll, right? Like he's running around talking with this plastic doll that's his dead baby. You, well, now that I look at it, welcome to Pallywood, right? Anyway, they create lots of propaganda stuff. They have to because they don't have anything real to show. We have lots of real horrors to show, like the aforementioned video of Naama Levy, thankfully freed as a hostage, going, being dragged around behind that vehicle. But they have to make up stuff. They have to fake stuff because it's not happening the way they want it to. All right, Russia, Ukraine. Let's keep this quick because I know I've got a long episode now. When I was very young, I've told you guys, I was born 100 days into the Reagan administration. We lived in a world that was more black and white than we have since then. Good guys and bad guys, right? We had us, the United States. We had our allies. We had the good guys at all, right? America and our allies versus the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Union, the bad guys at all. And there wasn't a lot of, those lines weren't blurred very well, and we had one side or the other. Now, that all started to change pretty early in my life. And I remember, that Gorbachev came to office, and then Reagan and Gorbachev started having this meeting and that meeting, and things started becoming more cordial. And pretty soon, we had Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. And like that was one of the greatest moments in American history because, Reagan told Gorbachev how to end the Cold War. Like, how do we get out of this crazy thing that we've been in all this time that the Soviets really couldn't sustain? Tear down the wall. Let these countries go. Let them choose their own path. Right? Once the Eastern Bloc was gone, we'll go from there. And it ended up leading to the dissolution of the Soviet Union altogether, ultimately. And those dominoes started to fall pretty quickly once that event happened. But that all led up to the events of 1989. By 1988, of course, Reagan was in Moscow. He was there in Moskva, with meeting with these guys and this kind of thing. So everything was toning down. So the black and white was starting to break down a little bit. And then after 1991, once the Soviet Union was gone altogether, in that short time, right, from 1989 to in 2 years, our black and white world went into shades of gray. It became a grayscale world, right? You just had all of a sudden, it was, the bad guys aren't the bad guys anymore. And who are the good guys? And it's like we had the Tiananmen Square massacre. The Chinese were technically our allies in the Cold War, right? But now all of a sudden they were kind of the bad guys, and they would become, we would try to be friendlier with them, but they would become more malignant over time. So from then on, the world changed. We spent the 90s in kind of casting about, peacekeeping mission here, war in Iraq, these kinds of things. But, and the war on terror came in the aughts. And even that was shades of gray because it's like, bin Laden and all of the leaders of his movement were Saudis, right? Were from Saudi Arabia, right? But the Saudis were on our side, right? And it's like, but the Saudi population, and it was back and forth and complications and layers. And so it's been a different world. And lately, especially since the first Trump administration, there's been an acknowledgement that we are back in a time of great power competition. We're no longer in the war on terror terrorism is still a problem, and we still have problems with terrorists. The Taliban are back in charge in Afghanistan. Thank you, Joe Biden. Oh my God. Um, and that's not that's not a good thing. Um, you have a lot of veterans who are injured, and it's like, what was that all for? Anyway, I got to get back on track here because I don't want to waste your time. But I mean, these are my friends and family who fought in these wars. I was in and out before all this stuff happened. I'm a little bit older than that generation, but I know a lot of people, heroes who went and fought over there and have lasting, lifelong effects from it. And it's painful to look them in the eye and have us have that conversation where it's like, what was it all for? Right? What did we accomplish? Anyway, it's frustrating. So one of the first moments of my being your shadow president was when I said when the Taliban started their offensive in the summer of 2021, that we needed to go back in there and knock them back on their butts to force them to sign a reasonable peace deal. That was the only way. I was right. Biden was wrong. And because of that weakness, Vladimir Putin thought he could invade Ukraine. It's how we got in this mess in the first place, right? Weakness begets war, strength begets peace, right? Peace through strength. It's not difficult. It's really not hard. The Reagan-esque foreign policy, right? Okay. If you're woke, you think that America's the problem in the world. Woke left, woke right, same thing. America's the problem in the world. If the woke left, America's the problem because we're imperialist Christians, or we're violent, we're evil, we're not Marxist. And if you're woke right, America's evil because we're woke and we spread gay marriage and we have all these kinds of things. Either way, it's America bad. America's the problem in the world, whichever side you're looking at it from. That's wokeness for you. And it requires you to be in that delusion. I say America is what's right with the world. I'm a patriot, and I want us to, America and our allies, the people who share our values, should win. Okay. We've been in these shades of gray. Since 2022, the shades of gray have coalesced once again into black and white. We are back to a binary situation. Good guys and bad guys. And it's a hard thing to do because intellectually, we don't want that. Even during the Cold War, we chafed at the idea that we're good guys and bad guys. I mean, in World War II, and in the 30s especially, with the rise of Hitler and all that stuff that was going on, and Stalin was just as bad. It was, there was a lot of evil to talk about at the time, but we started to recognize, again, good guys and bad guys and this kind of thing as we headed into the 40s, and then we won, right? In 1945, as of September 2nd, those bad guys were gone. No more Nazi Germany, no more Japanese Empire. Il Duce didn't even make it to 1945, right? His regime fell in 43, and he was executed, hanged from a street lamp in 44. So you have this, he didn't make it that far anyway. So the black and white there, but that was a very short time. And even after that, for a number of years, we tried to, we got a peace treaty between the communists and the nationalists in China, and we tried to be friendly to Uncle Joe, Joseph Stalin, the Vosgd. We tried all of that, and it didn't work. Ultimately, Stalin wanted what he wanted: world conquest, world domination, and that led to the Cold War, right? And after Stalin's death, Beria, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, none of these people who followed were able to find a way out of that conflict. Okay, so anyway, we're back there, right? So we have Russia, China. China is the main one now, so let's reverse it. China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. These are the Axis powers. Now, Iran's had the snot kicked out of them, right? 2 years after, I know that I was going to make that strategic analysis. I just don't have the time. So the next one, I'll talk about, where we are 2 years later, but I've been talking about that for a while now. So you guys know, I mean, but I don't want this to be a 3-hour episode. So let's get this wrapped up. Anyway, Iran's had the snot kicked out of them. North Koreans are starving. Like North Korea really isn't a problem as much. They could be a nuisance to us, but they're not so much a problem as the other countries that we're going to talk about here. China is the big problem because they have a lot of resources and large population and large industrial base, and Russia looked like a big problem, but now they've proven to be a paper tiger. The Russian economy is now struggling. They are having gas shortages thanks to Ukraine blowing up their refineries. Russia's they've embarrassed themselves. They're not in good shape. Okay, so we're in a black and white world. I understand that it's difficult to make that transition. Remember what I talked about many episodes ago, Walter Lippmann talking about, the great, liberal thinker, classical liberal thinker, Walter Lippmann. He was talking about, the story that during the First World War, there was this island where there were Germans and British and French people living, right? It's a fictional story, for the most part, but it illustrates the point. People were doing business and and once a month a ship came and gave them the news, and all of a sudden they found out they were at war. And there had been a war for weeks, but they didn't know it, right? That's kind of like the whole ostrich head in the sand thing. Like, times change and we don't always see the change. Now, I'm one of those people. You're gregarious Vulcan. I'm someone who embraces change. Even in myself, in my own life, personally, I change. I watch the world around me, my family situation. Like, I'm always trying to embrace change. And when I catch myself, trying to be a stick in the mud and not embrace change, I catch myself and I try to correct it. But the point is, we have to acknowledge when things have changed. And that's the world we live in now. We are at war. Okay? It's not a direct hot war. The Russians have not declared war on the United States, neither has China. But we are at war. China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran have one thing in common, and one thing only. Those are very disparate powers with very disparate agendas. They have nothing in common aside from tyranny, right? But communist tyranny versus fascist tyranny of Russia, the, sort of religious psycho state, this obsessive state built in North Korea versus the, Islamofascist state of Iran. So they have one thing in common, and that is they want to break us. We are the target of their aggression. Okay, so when Russia invades Ukraine, when the Chinese threaten Taiwan, when they intimidate the Filipinos and their fishing waters, when they're trying to take control of the South China Sea, when all of these things are happening, these are not happening in a vacuum. They're not happening at random. These are not disparate, disconnected events. They are all one thing. All right, when Iran pushes for October 7th, all of that is targeted at one thing. It is aimed at one purpose: to weaken the United States and our power in the world. They even spend a lot of time on social media with their bots and whatever, trying to weaken us from within. They spent a lot of time promoting this wokeness to separate people and trying to get right-wing wokeness now, the Qataris especially, to separate us so that, if they could get the right to break up between, a group of nutterball woke right people and, the rest of the MAGA right, if you want to call it that, the traditional, because there's people who are very Trump oriented and then people who are more traditional conservatives, like myself. And, yes, I support Trump, but I'm a traditional conservative. Like I'm not, someone who joined with the movement because of Donald Trump. I've been here for a while. So, anyway, the point is they're trying to divide us, just like they've destroyed the Democrat Party. I mean, they've completely blown it up, right? Doing something similar, dividing the woke from the moderates and making everybody look crazy, Anyway, this is their goal: to divide us internally, to attack our allies and make us look weak, to weaken American power in the world. That makes them the bad guys. That's the black. And we for all of our flaws, with all of our wokeness and our LGBTQ, blah, 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 two-spirit, whatever you want to add to that agenda, and everything that's wrong with us that we think is bad about us, our bad policymaking, our financial our abuse of our financial systems, and financial mismanagement, corruption, corporate greed, corporate mismanagement, corporate wokeness, all the things you don't like about us, whatever you want to say, okay? And our European allies, who are definitely not in the right. I mean, the British arresting people over memes, that's just asinine. For all of our flaws, we are the good guys, right? Okay, so yes, the British arrest a lot of people over memes, all right? But if you disagree with Vladimir Putin, the people who disagree with him have a funny way of falling out of windows at, 4 to 6 stories up, okay? There's a difference between, countries that have problems that we need to address, and we really do need to address them and stop acting like our enemies, and countries that are distinctly our enemies, okay? We're in a black and white world. We need to make that transition. We really need to get it, okay? Because there's no splitting hairs now, right? The Axis powers want to weaken America. They want to destroy America, and they are attacking our allies to do it. Okay, so that's the world we live in, whether we like it or not. And honestly, my friends, if it were up to me, this is not the world I would have designed, as I joke all the time. If Jews really did run the world, if there were elders of Zion or whatever, the world would be much better run. Your retirement portfolio would be doing much better. Things would be cheap and easy to get, and you'd get such a deal. Oh my God, because we never pay retail. Anyway, it would not be, anything like the things we're accused of. But anyway, I didn't choose it. Okay. If I could make the world a different way, I would. Okay. I personally have nothing against the people of China. I actually like Chinese people. I like Chinese culture. I like Chinese philosophy, Chinese food. There are many different flavors of China. All these people that are, Sichuan food, and that's Chinese food. No, actually, Manchurians have their own food, and so do the Cantonese, and there are various flavors of China. In any case, the point is, I like the Chinese people, but their government is malignant. And believe me, the Chinese people are aware. They know, but they also don't want to die. People who don't like Xi have a funny way of disappearing and never being heard from again. So people keep their mouths shut. They mumble to one another occasionally. They grumble a little, but they know better. Anyone who, the tallest blade gets cut. Right? They keep their blades of grass down. They keep their head down, let's just say. Okay. So, I wish we could all be friends, and that'd be great. We'd sit and sing Kumbaya, and I'd smoke cigars and drink scotch with anyone who wants to join me, and, or smoke hookah or something. It would be great. Be a great time. But that's not the world we live in, is it? All right. The world we live in is a world where we are enemies, not because people don't like each other, but because governments don't like each other. The Chinese system must be antagonistic to us. They cannot coexist. Their schema, their I shouldn't use psychological terms, their worldview, their point of view about the world, their definition of themselves, their self-identity, their agenda, their goals are incompatible with other countries having freedom, right? They want China rules the world, right? All under heaven, right? That's the way the Chinese talk about these things, because that, the emperor of China was styled as, the ruler of all under heaven, right? China will rule the world. And, for many years, China did rule the known world, right? It was this huge empire. Oh, there was a Korean kingdom off on a peninsula somewhere. And, the Koreans were they tributaries of the Chinese. And every once in a while, they'd have a war so that the Koreans could try to negotiate a better deal. There's this weird Japanese people off on some islands out there. Nobody cares about them. They're off in the hinterlands. They might as well be on Mars, right? And then there was Vietnam, where, again, a tributary, there's those people down there. We don't worry about them too much. It's just a bunch of swamps. Who wants to fight over it anyway? And every now and then they'd also have a war over, to negotiate a better deal. And the Chinese figured out pretty quickly, and as the Mongols learned the hard way, it's not fun fighting wars in Southeast Asia. There are a lot of Americans still alive today who can tell you exactly the same thing. So, all right. So, but other than those little exceptions, China ruled Asia, all under heaven. And the Communist Party adds this whole other thing to that where everything has to be under the Communist Party. So now it's going to be all under heaven, ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. Right. And the communism is not compatible with a free world. So that's why they're up against us. Vladimir Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Empire and have the power to take on the West. He wants to dominate Europe. He wants to control the happenings there. Right. He wants, they all want to rule the world. Like the 80s song says, right? Tears for Fears. Anyway, if they could get what they want, that would be very detrimental to our interests. The United States has gone to war in Europe twice in a century. We don't want to go a third time. Believe me. Okay? We don't want to see what happens when Russian armies start marching across the Polish border. Okay? We don't want to go there again. We don't need another war in Europe. I don't want my sons to have to go fight in the fields of Poland or in the Pacific again, like my grandfather fought at Okinawa, right? Among other places. But, Grandpa was never the same man when he came back from that war. And that caused a lot of problems for my family for years to follow. I would like my sons. Some of them will serve in the military, perhaps my daughter as well. But, they'll do their jobs, and I want them to serve in peacetime. Just, again, that peace through strength thing. I don't want to have to become a member of a Gold Star family because we let the Russians get away with murder and now they're attacking us. Or we let the Chinese get away with, we showed them weakness. Okay, so Donald Trump. Donald Trump talked a good talk about China during the campaign. We had a pretty good idea what he was going to do, and he came to office, and surely he has addressed the trade issues. The military issue is a little bit different. We clearly have this, pivot to the Pacific thing going on. We're kind of pulling back from Europe a little bit, although again, I'm not sure about that because, black and white, right? If we pull back from here, we're giving up. We are conceding territory in one place to protect territory in another. I mean, there's no way Taiwan is more valuable to us than Europe, right? And our interests. Okay. So this, so he's taken on China in a trade sense, and that's good because that has really injured the Chinese economy. It has shown Xi Jinping that he has vulnerabilities. And that is huge because the man doesn't listen to anyone. People who bring him bad news have a funny way of disappearing. So he gets surrounded by yes men. And now he's been forced to acknowledge that he has a weak hand, right? And that's very good for us because like I've said before, every morning Xi Jinping wakes up and does a math equation in his head, runs the calculation. Could I take Taiwan and defeat the US today? And every day, that equation comes out in the negative, and we want it to come out in the negative. Okay, so that's peace through strength. That's how we prevent wars. Now, the Chinese continue to intimidate Filipino fishing boats and Filipino Coast Guard vessels in internationally recognized Philippine waters, including, we had this recent collision where a Chinese naval, because of the excellent seamanship of the Filipinos, good men. They were excellent sailors. They were able to escape the Coast Guard ship and the Chinese destroyer, one of them blasting water at the Filipino ship. I mean, high pressure water can do a lot of damage. So that was actually quite dangerous. And this kind of thing. And thus the Chinese ships collided and they took the bow off the the Chinese Coast Guard vessel with some loss of life. The Chinese keep saying nobody died, but if you watch the video, it's pretty clear there were a couple of guys at least who did not come out of that. Anyway, so you have all this stuff going on. The South China Sea, the Chinese are still doing that. We've done nothing about any of that. So after the collision, the Chinese, whatever, an American destroyer came out of the port in the Philippines, sailed around for a little while and went back. The Chinese left it alone, of course, but that doesn't really do anything. So I'm sitting here, and it's like, yeah, the Trump administration's taking on China economically. They've shown Xi Jinping that he's vulnerable. Xi Jinping is so far behaving himself vis-a-vis Taiwan, but the intimidation continues, right? We have no solution for that right now. Our Israeli allies doing an excellent job of essentially neutralizing Iran, the U.S. just going in and dropping a few bunker busters, and that took care of that. Okay, that's peace through strength. I applaud President Trump for making excellent policy there. But in Ukraine, our failure to do anything about those situations in the South China Sea and the waters off the Philippines and our approach to Ukraine have made us look weak. That is the opposite of peace through strength. Trump looked naive. He and Vance were running around sharing Russian narratives. And you have J.D. Vance attacking Volodymyr Zelensky. Have you ever said thank you once? He had minutes earlier, making J.D. Vance look like a complete idiot. Like he completely embarrassed himself. From that moment on, I was, oh, wow. And thankfully, J.D. Vance has recovered from that, including in my opinion. I'm a lot more favorable, but he made an arse of himself. Volodymyr Zelensky is the hero of the 21st century so far. He is the Winston Churchill of the 21st century. And there is no reason J.D. Vance, who's still a nobody in the 21st century, should ever be speaking down to someone like Volodymyr Zelensky. But hey, he's the head of Ukraine and the president of Ukraine. And of course, he gets a lot of hate. And of course, he's also a Jew, right? And people find it's always okay to talk down to a Jew. They're all corrupt and sniveling, conniving trolls with horns on their heads. Nobody treats us with respect. In any case, Volodymyr Zelensky has actually been out there trying to defeat our enemies. Remember, those bad guys who want to do things that are against our interests. Anyway, so Trump took this policy where he's like, I can end that war in a day, 24 hours, right? And then he changed it, 100 days, right? And he goes out and he's like, so, his solution was, Russia's going to defeat Ukraine. Therefore, we should just stop the war now. We'll let Russia have what they have now, and there'll be a ceasefire, and we'll just convince Putin to be happy with what he's managed to conquer thus far, right? And the problem with that being that obviously the Ukrainians don't want to play along with that. They don't want to concede any territory. They don't want to give up. They don't want to surrender. They're fighting for their freedom against a brutal dictator. We've been there before, okay? In 1776, we were in the same boat, right? Can you imagine after that war, George Washington being willing to give up New York? Yeah, the Brits can keep New York and New England. We'll let them have that. They can keep South Carolina and New York. That they can have, and we'll just, we'll make do with the rest. No. We fought for our independence as a whole country. Anyway, so we bullied our ally and our friend, Ukraine, for 6 months. We turned off our intelligence sharing so that Vladimir Putin could more easily bomb Ukrainian cities and murder 12-year-old girls and civilians. As a nation, there is blood on our hands, right? We contributed to the deaths of Ukrainians while playing this game to end the war on Putin's terms, what they think was Putin's terms. Now, the only way Putin wants to end this war is where he controls Ukraine, okay? He can't end it any other way, all right? Anyone who knows anything knows that, but I'll come back to that. So we dallied for 6 months playing it Putin's way. And a funny thing happened, or rather, a funny thing didn't happen. There was no ceasefire. There have been no negotiations, nothing in earnest, nothing serious, right? I hoped that in spite of the stupidity of the approach, back to that, that somehow they would be successful, because obviously ending the killing would be good if that were possible, okay? But that's not. And so all along, I told you guys how this was going to go, that this was a bad approach to the situation. And a funny thing, I was right. Okay? As I often am. Does that make me arrogant, my friends, as I was accused of, not just, the arrogant Jew who doesn't know his place, right? But does that make me arrogant? Perhaps. Autistic people are often mistaken for being arrogant. We don't know the difference. Like, I don't understand how to be not arrogant or how to come off. I've tried many times in my life. I've tried to change to be, so people would perceive me as being less conceited or less arrogant, and I still get the same crap from people. So I've given up. I am what I am. I'm what God made me. You don't like it, take it up with the higher authority. But this is what he made me. This is what I am. I've made whatever changes I can make, and I keep trying to mold myself into something better. If that is arrogance, real conceit, it is well earned, because I have been right, as was Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Stephen Kotkin, Neil Ferguson, and Victor Davis Hanson, and everybody else. Boris Johnson, everybody else who knew. Everyone, every expert, everyone who has any knowledge on the subject knew that this was Putin's war. The only way to end this war is to make Putin stop the war. That's kind of how it works with aggression. If I'm hitting someone and I'm the one attacking them, the only way to stop the fight is to make me stop attacking. All right? Yes, then the other person can back down. All right? Now, yeah, two people who want to fight each other, that's a different story. But that's not what's happening here. Ukraine didn't want to fight. Right? In 2014, when Ukraine was invaded, they basically didn't have a military. That's why Putin was able to walk over them. Okay? This is how aggression works. It's so simple to me, it's infuriating that people cannot understand this. I've been telling you, other people have been telling you, everyone's been saying this, okay? Vladimir Putin is a psychopath, right? That doesn't make him crazy or wacky. He's crazy, but not, like some kind of nutter. Right? Psychopaths can be very calculating people, right? They can appear very intelligent and very functional, but they want things that are not reasonable, and they are willing to kill people to get them. Jordan Peterson has a lot of great videos about what constitutes being a psychopath, and you listen to him because he knows better than I. Anyway, so I was right. How do I know I was right? Because Trump is changing his position. He has recognized, he was talking at the UN. Well, I had this great relationship with Vladimir Putin. And I by the way, real quick, great UN speech. I know I'm picking on Trump a little bit and I've got to get this out of my system, but great UN speak. Go Trump, 2 thumbs up. 5 stars, my only reservation being his section on Ukraine. But then he tweeted out in favor of Ukraine later, and that kind of redeemed all of that. So I'm picking on Trump a little bit to make a point, because of course I am a supporter of his. He had this great relationship. So that was naivete. It was naive for him to think he had a good relationship with Putin. He didn't. He had a manipulative, toxic relationship with Vladimir Putin. Putin thought he could manipulate and abuse Trump to get what he wanted. All right? Joseph Stalin did the same thing. He tried to pull the same crap on Roosevelt, and Roosevelt played into it too. When Truman stopped playing that game, that's how we ended up in the Cold War, because we stopped conceding things to the Russians. It was no longer Harry Hopkins giving the Soviets whatever they wanted. All right, so Trump gets it now. He realizes that Putin has to be stopped, and now we're getting somewhere. Right now, we're making a deal with Ukraine to sell more weapons to them. Now we're working with NATO more, get their defenses up, and we are acknowledging that Russia is the problem. Now, I have to applaud Trump for seeing that he was wrong and changing course. And I don't want to pick on the guy. I really like Donald Trump. I really like what he's done for our country. It's great. I have to say this, though. He pursued for 6 months an idiotic policy that led to deaths. More people died and more people will die in the future because of those 6 months. And that, well, we're way over 6 months now, but at least 6 months of terrible policy making. Okay? Because he took entirely the wrong approach that any expert could have told him otherwise. Now, I know we don't like experts now because we've abused expertise. Guys in white lab coats coming up and talking about stand 6 feet apart and wear a mask and get a jab and this kind of thing. And then none of that had any impact on the behavior of the disease. Why? Because that's not how airborne viruses work. You can't stop them by standing 6 feet apart or wearing a mask. It doesn't work that way. Never has. Anyway, quarantines don't work. They really don't. God. Anyway, but we've had these experts who have abused their thing, and they go out and they're, well, climate change and this kind of thing. Yeah, not that kind of expertise. But there are people who really are knowledgeable of their history, okay, who really know what's going on. And those people should be believed and those people should be trusted, okay? Stephen Kotkin's not a great Trump supporter, not a great fan of Donald Trump, but he knows a great deal about Russia. He's written books on Joseph Stalin. He's one of the leading experts. And he's generally considered center-right, okay? That's the guy you should be taking advice from, not Tucker Carlson, right? It's pretty obvious that Trump was influenced by some, nutterballs on the woke right and, believing he had this good relationship with Putin, which he didn't, okay? He gets that now. Thank you, President Trump, for changing course. Thank you for adopting the right course. Now we need to take a stand. And black and white, Axis and allies, good guys and bad guys. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. We need to take these guys down. And that is huge. Now, I've been very critical of Donald Trump because I think that was a bad policy. I support everything else he does, almost everything. I'm broadly a supporter of his, but I don't believe, I think this person was trying, we should just trust President knows what he's doing and pray for him. I'm always open to prayers and blessings. I think that's a good thing. But the fact is, I don't trust anyone implicitly, even myself, really. I'm not going to give anyone 100% faith like that. Okay. That's just not how things work. Maybe it's a Jewish thing. We don't really do that kind of thing. Well, some people do, but we're not above that either. We're humans. It's a funny thing. Jews are people too. And we come with all the flaws that people come with. But when I support Donald Trump, I support him because he's right on the issues, because of his policies where I believe he is right. And if someone else had those policies, I might support someone else. Right, different circumstances. But right now, it's Donald Trump who's pushing these right policies, and he's a heroic figure, and I'm so grateful. He's put up with a lot of crap. Oh my God, including missing piece of his ear, 2 centimeters to the left, and we'd have lost him. What a horrible day that was. Oh, so Trump good, generally. I will be critical where I think he's wrong. No, I think I'm, so arrogant. I'm our president. I'm smarter than Donald Trump. I'm better than... No, Trump's very strategic. He knows a lot more about this trade stuff than I do. I like following it and thinking about it strategically and that kind of thing, and enjoying watching him work. Okay, but the point is, I'm not trying to belittle him, but I am going to be objective. And when I think he's wrong, I'm going to say it. Now that I've said that, we can move on. Like, he had the wrong policy there. He sees it. I see it. You see it. Those of you who are paying attention and don't have your head in the sand and are keeping up with the times. And we get it. Now we have to defeat the Axis powers. And the sooner we do that, the better. And that will head us in the right direction. More on that next time. I've talked at you entirely too long. I needed to do a long episode because I got to catch up on a bunch of stuff. I appreciate everybody listening. Please find Mensch-Kight Geopolitics on X. Like the show. Please give me a rating. I never say these things. Like I should be out promoting the podcast. I'm supposed to do interviews with people. And for years, I've been putting this podcast out. I'm not good at any of that stuff. Like I said, I'm a little autistic. I'm in my own world. I don't want to talk to other people if I don't have to. I try. I do have a few friends who are in this, like Ryan McBath, who are in this world, and Jake Jacobs, who also make, and I should do more stuff with them. We'll get there. Right now, I just want to get back to getting you guys episodes while I have a voice to speak. I was down for 3 weeks. So, anyway, I'm glad to be feeling better. Anyway. Hope to interact with you guys soon. Please keep the emails coming. Appreciate you guys and your thoughts. You can insideisraelnews@gmail.com still works. IK@MK Geopolitics. So you can go there. That's also geopolitics. IK@MKgeopolitics.com. That'll be the new website at some point when I get finished building it. That's a new email that's out there. So, keep sending me your emails. Appreciate your thoughts. Agree, disagree, what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear, that kind of thing. I try to be funnier. I'm just trying to get back in the swing of things after losing my voice and having a rough summer. Anyway, hope you had a great Yom Kippur, those who are celebrating Sukkot coming up. I'm looking forward to it. A fun holiday. We enjoy so much. And spending time with friends and family and that kind of thing. Good holidays. So with that, I will say, as always, goodbye, lehitraot, tekimas, ciao.
Writers of the history, stand with me, look into my eyes and see, people go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light, everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers, life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers, life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Ooh, ooh, ooh.